The lineage of From Software and creative director Hidetaka Miyazaki's Souls franchise has been seen and felt across the entire gaming landscape. It has essentially created a new genre of games, brought back difficulty into the mainstream, and has inspired untold amounts of clones and other games that try to capture the same magic. After the Dark Souls trilogy was completed, they went with a different approach with their next title, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. They ditched the European medieval aesthetic in favor of a trip to the Sengoku period of feudal Japan. From Software has changed the core gameplay almost as dramatically as the shift in location. Gone are the monolithic cathedrals and castle gates. In their places are dojo rooftops, cherry blossoms, and stunning outdoor vistas. Just looking at the game presents a very different atmosphere and clearly separates it from their previous work. If you're a student of history, however, you will recognize that this isn't the first time they have made a game in this setting. Tenchu for the PlayStation was a classic, and in many ways Sekiro is inspired by that game as much as the other Souls games. And outside of some very base mechanics from the Dark Souls series, and some DNA that carries over, Sekiro is a very different game, and I'm going to try to minimize how much I bring up those games when I'm talking about Sekiro. Sekiro is something new, inspired by elements of From Software's history, but those concepts are forged into something decidedly unique. One of the more dramatic changes is the way the story is even told. Sekiro has a much more clear and concise story. Your character, named the Wolf, has a very clear and direct purpose, and you will meet and interact multiple times with a varied cast of characters who all speak plainly for the most part. Despite the non-linear level design, the narrative does move forward and it has multiple endings, with each ending being a clear sense of finality to all of the plot that has come before it. Everything from gameplay mechanics, items, and upgrades are direct and clear about their purpose. In-game upgrades are very clear about what they will do for you, and the deeper loot and RPG mechanics have been stripped down in multiple ways. Many of the skills in the game are passive abilities, and when you do acquire active skills, you can usually only equip one or two at any given time. The Wolf is a set character with a set look, and you won't be scouring the world or farming enemies to get a good piece of armor or a new weapon. Skill points are earned when you fill up a meter, and despite losing half of your resources upon death, once you gain a skill point, no matter what, you can't lose it. On paper, many of these changes seem like a simplification of the depth and nuance you would expect from their previous games, but in no way does that mean this game is easy or lacking choice. The very limited loadout brings greater importance on the handful of skills you can use. Even with the tools at your disposal being a bit more narrow, each one remains viable and useful throughout the entire game. Character builds in Sekiro are now based mostly on what your preference of gameplay is, rather than some online guide showing you some unstoppable one-shot build. All of these changes to the core storytelling and game systems are very welcome because it allows for a much greater focus on the piece of the puzzle that Sekiro does better than any action game in years, the core combat itself. Sekiro is an action game featuring moments of stealth. The Wolf is extremely nimble, with no stamina bar to restrain his movement or options, and the ability to jump and grapple. He features the Shinobi prosthetic, a Nero-like arm that gets replaced with multiple tools and gadgets that you can equip, and it allows him to be very versatile in his skill set. Sekiro also doesn't feature a fat roll of any kind. Instead, you can run full sprint, jump off an enemy's head, grapple to a rooftop, then backflip down while throwing ninja stars. If all of that sounds like a radical departure from the slow-paced, rolling, methodical style of combat of its predecessors, that's because it is. The Tenchu lineage shows up in regards to the stealth. The Wolf can use the Shinobi arts to stalk his enemies and try to balance the scales as much as possible. Using the grappling hook, wall shimmies, and sneaking around tall grass are some of the more basic ways to get around the battlefield. Enemies have a yellow indicator to show when they are aware and close to catching you, and that also allows you a chance to slip back into the shadows before all-out combat erupts. The stealth of Sekiro is honestly one of its weakest features. It's never bad per se, but it just doesn't innovate or bring anything new to that particular style of game. The bonfire mechanic that basically lets you reset an area does add a nice wrinkle to the stealth, as knowing the enemy layout and placement is just as important as how you go about sneaking around. Despite not being great, the stealth is a huge part of the game. Using it properly can make many combat encounters much less stressful, and almost every single enemy in Sekiro, even the mini-bosses, are susceptible to stealth death blows. When stealth fails and you must draw your sword, that's when Sekiro is at its best, and also where this game differentiates itself from most of the other games in the Souls genre. The wolf and his enemies all have the standard life bars you would expect, but most enemies and bosses in this game will be killed without ever chipping away at it. Instead, the focus on close, intimate swordplay is front and center, and with the removal of the stamina system arrives the posture system. Every swing you throw at an enemy will cause a meter over their head to begin filling. This is an enemy's posture. Your attacks and your parries will cause this meter to fill. When it fills, the enemy becomes vulnerable to a one-shot death blow, which is a clean execution that'll kill your opponent regardless of how much health they actually have left. Some mini-bosses and big bosses will have little red pips next to their names, and each death blow will successfully remove one pip, their life bar refills, and combat resumes. The posture system is also great because it's a two-way mechanic, and the same rules apply to you during combat as well. If you just hold block or mistime your deflections, your posture will break. Being posture broken is almost always a surefire way to end up dead very quickly. The tension and quick reflexes needed to stay alive in combat are what really separates Sekiro from the pack. Most enemy fights are a ballet of parries, side dodges, and leaps over huge sweeping attacks on both sides until one fighter makes that critical mistake or is countered at just the right moment. It's violent, fast, and sudden, and it resembles the lethal fights of the Bushido Blade series from Square much more than a traditional Souls game. Just like the title implies, if you do fail at combat or make that critical mistake, you do have a second chance. A resurrection that you can do which brings you back with half of your health and allows you to get back into the fight, or if you're like me, you can resurrect and run to the nearest bonfire, aka the homeward idols in this game, and try to rest up and get all your health back. The resurrection isn't a free gimmick, however, because you will have to defeat enemies in order to replenish its use, but it does come in handy and can be upgraded throughout your adventure. Visually, Sekiro seems almost pedestrian at first. Pretty straightforward locations based on feudal Japan dominate the first half. Dojos, bamboo thickets, and carp-filled ponds, snow-covered mountaintops, and shrines litter the open world. Things do start making a big shift to the more fantastical, as From Software pulls from Japanese mythology in cool and unexpected ways. It doesn't reach the levels of Nioh or Onimusha with its fantastical elements, but it does fuse them with the real-world setting in a much more cohesive way than its peers. On consoles, specifically base Xbox and base PS4, the looks and performance is about the same as the Dark Souls trilogy, with frame pacing and frame drops once again rearing their head. On PC, which is a platform I reviewed this on, it ran and performed fantastic despite the 60 FPS cap. The game remained locked at that 60 FPS, however, and never wavered in my entire playtime, despite some truly epic and huge moments later on in the game. If I was going to recommend the platform, I 100% would recommend playing it on PC. The audio design also performs well, with a fantastic suite of battle themes that swell and fall at the right moment to give the bigger fights a truly cinematic feeling. The rest of the score is pretty average, however, without a real memorable theme that I feel fits how unique Sekiro Shadows Die Twice actually is. The story itself, like I said, also features multiple endings, and the storyline holds up pretty well with great voice work, especially if you play with the heavily recommended Japanese audio mix. I did encounter some slight moments of frustration throughout my playtime, as the non-linear nature of the open world design can break some scripting in ways, with new story elements sometimes requiring me to go into areas I've already explored just to trigger the right cutscene that can then advance the storyline. That and some of the stealth issues are just minor nitpicks, however, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a thrilling action-adventure experience, and is firmly my favorite From Software game ever made, even with the great run of titles they have made in their long and storied history. At times, it's more Bushido Blade than Dark Souls, but Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is one of the most pure, exhilarating action games I've ever played. Make sure you guys don't miss it. I'm giving this game a 9.6. It is truly a special game with the focus on combat really separating it from anything else I've played. I hope you guys enjoy my review. I am Dave, aka Namtox. This is a Rectify review, so you can read the full written one, see some fancy screenshots over at rectifygaming.com. Please share and tweet it out. Let me know what you all think down below. And I will be streaming my New Game Plus run, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Have a good one, be safe, and I'll see all of you next time.